the bank.
Hey Brett, how's it going this week?
Good, Ange. How are you?
Good. Well, that means it's another episode of Money in the Bank, the podcast where we talk about all things related to personal finance and more. So, are you ready for your trivia question, Brett?
All right. Let's go.
What level is consumer debt at in 2019?
It's over 9,000, I think.
9,000? Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. So just talking about United States, right? Is that what you're...
I think that's the stat I saw, but it could have been global.
Okay. I think it's in the trillions, because I saw like student loan debt was like by far and away like the largest thing. That's what I saw the other day. More than like everything else combined. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's just what I think I saw. I don't know. So probably a couple $1 trillion, like a ton of money.
I think consumer debt is at $4 trillion, and I think student loan debt is at $2 trillion.
Oh, wow. All right. Knocking it out of the park today. Good job. Article I think I saw at some point.
So which means I think we probably need to do a lot more episodes about debt here in the future, and specifically student loan debt. I think there's a lot more we can talk about there as to, if you have student loan debt, how to pay it off. And, I was watching, we were actually watching something on TV the other day it was not on TV, it was on YouTube. But it was talking about like why millennials can't buy homes, and it was really talking about like student loan debt is wrecking the millennial population. And like his example, the guy who's talking was like, tell me how somebody making minimum wage can pay off the average student loan balance, which is at like $30,000. And so I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And I want to actually do an episode about like if you are, $30,000 in student loan debt and you make minimum wage, like here's a mock budget. So that could be future episodes to come, because I think debt is obviously a huge problem. And so we should talk more about it.
Yeah, I think most everybody we know is in debt and is nowhere near getting out of debt, right? They're just like paying minimum payments or something like that. So, most everybody is still affected by this right now, especially in our age demographic and lower. Yeah.
So now that we've talked all this about debt, that is not what today's episode is about at all.
Nailed
Just
it.
a tangent. So this is actually our kind of last episode for the month of February that we're releasing on a Wednesday night. So we've done this like 2 episodes a week, and we've actually gotten really good listenership. I was like not so sure how it would pan out, but it seems like most of our audience is actually tuning into both of our episodes each week, so that's really awesome. Hopefully everybody's liking it. So if it's going to be continued or not is still kind of to be determined. Lately, we've been enjoying producing more podcasts, but it all depends on our schedule. So we won't commit to anything, but maybe we'll continue doing 2 a week here and there. So, but for this last one, we kind of talked about stoicism, if you want to call it that, but we've been talking more about our life philosophy and how we kind of found ways to be happy without focusing on the almighty dollar, I guess. And so we've kind of walked through, like it's okay if you can't buy everything now, and delayed gratification is a good thing, and voluntary comfort is
discomfort.
Uncomfort
is bad too.
Uncomfort is bad too. Voluntary discomfort is like okay to feel. But for this week's episode, I kind of wanted to pivot away from that and just share a little bit more of our background and what makes us who we are, I guess, in terms of savers. And I wanted to share our best financial decision we've ever made, or maybe one of the best we've ever made, and one of the worst financial decisions we've ever made. So I can go first, and I will share my worst financial decision first.
I like starting with the bad news first.
Yeah, so we'll go bad first. So, and again, like this might not be the worst of all time, because I was talking to Brett before this, and I was like, I've really harped on the fact that I bought a new car after I graduated college, pretty much on every episode ever. So while I still consider that to be one of my worst financial decisions ever, I'm not going to like reshare that story and beat a dead horse. So this is going to be a little different story. So when I was in middle school, I feel like that's the age where there's like all this pressure on you to like be a certain way or fit into a certain box or there's some, right, like middle school sucks. We can all kind of agree. Like there's a lot of pressure on like, you have to like be pretty and smart and wear the right clothes and right, all that stuff. And so I definitely felt a lot of this pressure. And I remember like, I just really started fixating on material things. And I was like, well, if I buy this like Dooney and Burke purse, like that'll make me happy, right? Like, because you see people at school like carrying these purses and then you're like, well, I want that, right? I want what they have. So I guess it was a very classic example of keeping up with the Joneses, right? So I looked online and I found this like bubblegum pink Dooney and Burke purse that I really wanted, and it was $130. So then even Angela back then, like little Angela, was like, I'm going to put this into a spreadsheet. Like if I make, $10 a week from allowance or whatever, and then I babysit and I can make this much, like how long is it going to take me to save up $130? Because at that point in my life, like I was 14, so $130 was like a very big goal. So I I started babysitting more, I started picking up odd jobs, and I remember like I finally got $130 in my possession. I was super jazzed. I think it was my sister actually drove me to the mall. I picked out this purse, I bought it, and like whatever, right? I guess like at the end of the day, I realized like, yeah, sure, I liked it for a while. And then before you knew it, like it was collecting dust in the back of my closet, not getting used anymore. I wasn't carrying it around. And I remember actually we were doing spring cleaning before we moved, recently. And, like, I found this old bin of high school stuff. And sure enough, like, there was this old purse. And I feel like there's this, like, lie that everyone tells you about, like, designer purses of, like, oh, but they're, like, collectors and you can keep them forever and whatever. And, like, no. It's, like, there's no value in this purse. There's, like, nothing left to it. And, like, at the age of, 28 now, I don't want a bubblegum pink Dooney and Burke purse to carry around. So, ultimately, it was, like, not something I wanted in the long run, and I would be much happier if 14-year-old Angela had put that, even if I just put that $130 like in an envelope and saved it for my future self, like I'd be happier with $130 than this like old purse. And I think the other really kind of interesting thing is like basically when I bought that purse, because I just saved up that amount of money, my net worth went from like $130 to zero, like right, immediately.
That's the bigger impact, right? Yeah, you let yourself fall into this trap of, I'm going to work really hard for this money, come out with this thing that I wanted to have, but go broke doing it, right? You were purse poor.
Right. And so, like, I think that really kind of taught me the lesson. And, like, when other people tell you can afford something, they don't know. Like, everyone's bad with money. So, like, if you go from, right, like, I thought I could afford it because it was, like, if you have $130, you can afford this thing. Like, that was the definition I was going off of. And I mean, technically that's true, but realistically at the end of the day, yeah, I was purse poor. Like, I put all my money in the world into this purse where, like, then the next day, if one of my friends would have called me up and been like, hey, want to go to the movies? I would have had to say no. And, like, that stings, right? Like, I just don't think I really thought through, like, how much money that was and the other things that I could have done with that money.
Right. Oh, the good old opportunity cost, right?
Right. So, well, yeah, that's the one we're going with. So, Brett, now that I shared my, very charming purse story, what do you got for me? What's your worst?
My worst financial decision. So, probably, I would say I give you a hard time about not doing your car story, but I think my car story is probably one of the worst decisions I've ever made, because I bought a brand new car that was like all the bells and whistles for that car while I was in like high school, just graduating from high school. And right, that was just a poor use of my money during that time, right? Because I was like, okay, I got all this graduation money and like I had money from my business and like poured like a lot of my net worth right into that vehicle purchase.
So I was purse poor and you were car poor.
I was car poor, yeah. Because so I was like, oh man, got to get the moonroof, got to get like the sweet like 2-door sedan that like looks really nice with the paint color that I want. And I'm sure that I'm not very good at negotiating car rates either, so I'm sure I didn't get a very good deal compared to other people. Anyway, and And yeah, so mine was like $24,000 that I got with a auto loan at the time also for some of it. Like I put a lot of money down toward it, but I didn't want to like drive my bank account to zero like some fool buying a purse. So I did get an auto loan, and then I paid that off like really quickly, right? Anyway, as soon as soon as I was able to. But yeah, I don't think I got as much value out of it because I got like the fancy, navigation system, right? That had like the cool screen and stuff at the time. And guess how useful that is in today's market, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and
awesome 10-year-old GPS. That's fantastic.
A lot of times when we're driving around now, it like literally doesn't recognize roads because they weren't built yet, or it just like errors out and completely like shuts down the entire touch screen system,
Right.
so you can't even see the clock.
Yeah, it runs off like this ghetto DVD system like that's behind the screen, and apparently like just the car bouncing on the road in regular wear and tear like scratches up the DVD. So there's like parts of the DVD that it can't read, and it just crashes the whole entertainment system. And I was like, oh, okay. I looked into this after I got the car, and I realized this was a problem like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years after I got it. And they were like, oh, yeah, you can buy like a new DVD for like $250 or something to get like the updated maps and like fix the scratch problem. I'm like, this is not my problem. Yeah, this is your bad system. But yeah, that's what it is. So that's just the way it is. And who needs it now anyway? Like, I don't need this like ghetto system. My phone works just as great. I just put my phone right on top of that screen, and I have a way better quality of life experience with maps and navigation.
All right. But since I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy because you wouldn't let me share my car story, so that can't be your worst one. So you actually came up with another one when we were talking about this earlier, and I thought it was actually a really good point to bring up because you graduated from college without student loan debt, which is like huge in today's world, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about more of that why later. But when you graduated, you moved to Chicago. And I feel like you really kind of fell into a little bit of a baller lifestyle for a while where you were just like, I'm making money, I don't have debt, I can go out to eat a lot more, I can buy my friends really nice presents, and you lived it up for a few years, I would say.
That's true. Yeah. So my story was I went from basically having my own business all the way from like middle of high school all the way through college. So I was like earning the money that I was getting, right? So I like could tell you exactly like the effort that I put into something and the dollars that I got out were like directly correlated. And then I start working as a consultant, like a traveling consultant for this other company where they're paying me, and they're paying me like way more than I had ever made at my like when I worked for like when I was interning and stuff in college, also separate from my business. But yeah, I was like, oh man, I'm making like baller cash now. I'm living in Chicago. There's so many things to do, going out, like making new friends, and the people I knew that also moved to Chicago, like meeting them at the bars and stuff. And yeah, always going out to eat because there's so many because I'm in a big city now. I'm not in the same hometown that I grew up in. So I'm like eating as much as I can at so many different places and trying new things. And even buying, I felt like I had more money now in general, just sitting around. So I was like prioritized buying presents for other people too. Like I dedicated like thousands of dollars a year to like just gift giving because I wanted to be like the person that like got like the best thing for people. Not necessarily the most expensive thing or whatever, but like I could find like the best present for people and like make sure that they like got it and stuff. Or like I got you some random sweater one time, just off of a whim, right?
But that was probably your best financial decision, right? It was a good investment,
right? Reel her in. All right, got it.
But no, like yeah, that's very true. When I met you, I remember like Christmas, the first Christmas that we were dating. And you had like spreadsheets to organize. It's not like just for like a few people you were buying like these amazing gifts. It was like 20 or 30 people deep of you were spending like thousands of dollars, and it's a very nice thing to do. But at the end of the day, like it just wasn't sustainable long term.
Right. It was probably just at this point, right, it was a bunch of like crap that nobody has anymore, I'm sure, right? It was buying like a bunch of pink purses for people, right? Because they were like, oh my God, I really want this thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, dropping the Benjamins. Here's your purse. I'm like, whatever. And you're like, oh cool. And then like 2 years later, you're like, what purse?
Right. Yeah. And And, like, I remember one year I go into your apartment and there's just, like, buckyballs everywhere because there was, like, a sale on ThinkGeek. And you didn't even, like, necessarily have people to give them all to. You just ordered, like, 50.
Yeah.
So you gave, like, everyone you knew buckyballs, and then you still had, like, a dozen left over. And I remember in our garage sale last summer, we were still selling these.
Right, yeah. There was still, like, 4 or 5 left in a box that I've just had for 10 years. Yeah, so those were sweet. But yeah, I mean, obviously I reined that back in. But yeah, when they're paying you to, like, all your travel expenses are covered. I can go anywhere on the weekends for free that the company's paying for as long as I'm back on the job site, Monday through Thursday. That all my meals are covered when I travel and stuff, right? Like, I was just, like, quickly accumulating a lot of extra wealth, really suddenly.
Yeah.
That I didn't previously have, like, a long-term plan for at that point in my life, right? Because at that point I was, like, paying stuff off and, like, paying that off for college and stuff, or, like, paying off my college tuition, and, like, so all my money, like, had a purpose of where it was going to. And this was really the first time I got into a point where now I'm making a good amount of money that is, like, doesn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for that to just become, like, a waste.
And that's why I wanted to bring up this example, because I think it's a really, really good point, and a trap that a lot of people fall into is inflating your lifestyle when you get more income. And, I mean, now I think that you realize that there's other things to save for. Like, if I asked you today, similarly to I would be happier with $130 in this purse that I bought in middle school, would you be happier with, let's say, between all the gifts and going out to the bars and all this stuff, for a course of, a few years, so let's say maybe $5,000 is probably not an unreasonable number to put on that.
Oh, I was going to say 10 to 20.
Okay, I was going to say 10,000. Okay, yeah. So we'll say 10. Would you be happier with $10,000?
Yeah, screw those other friends. Give me that money back. Give me these presents.
But I think, like, that's hindsight is 20/20, but I think the reason we wanted to share this with people is to help you, maybe if you are at that point in your life. And I just want to kind of piggyback off of his example and say I kind of did the opposite approach. So I graduated from college and I had student loan debt. So my money had a purpose, right? So I was paying off student loan debt. Then I bought a car, which, we all know how I feel about that now, but I did buy a car, and that kept me in debt, and that kept me motivated. So while I had debt, whether it was student loan debt or auto loan debt, my priority number one was paying that off as fast as humanly possible. So for the first 2.5 years after I graduated, I was just paying off debt. And so all my money had a purpose. And then by the time all that got paid off, I remember having this thought of, like, what do I do now? Because I've been paying off debt. And it was, like, one of those pivotal decisions of, like, I could reward myself and, like, save up for a new car or save up for more purses, right? Or whatever it is. But I feel like at that point, Brett and I made the pivotal decision to save for investments. So that's when we started, buying real estate properties. That's when we started exploring mutual funds, maxing out, IRAs or 401ks or HSAs, and really, getting a lot out of those investment vehicles. And to me, having that kind of time where I was in debt payoff to, like, mature a little bit more, maybe, so I wasn't just fresh out of college making all this money, really kind of helped me be long-term smart, I guess, and save for the future, which is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially a good thing, just the other day you were sharing with me an article you found about, like, the average and median retirement balances in America. So, the fact that at the age of 23, I was prioritizing saving for retirement, and then, now we see these average balances where people are unable to retire because they did not save enough money. It makes you really, happy that you did when you see those sorts of things.
Right. Scary low numbers.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we talked about our worst mistakes, let's move on to our best. So again, I will kind of start first. My best decision, and this goes back to literally my entire life, is I never let my savings account balance drop below $1,000. Now, I'm sure at some point when I was young, it wasn't quite there yet, but I've shared this before. When I was a kid, my dad had a rule that any money I earned, whether it was babysitting or, gift money, or not chore money, I guess that was in its own category, but any, like, gift money or any babysitting money, or even when I started working at Mancino's at the age of 16, 50% of everything I made had to go into savings. So, very quickly in life, when you have like aunts and uncles that give you, 25, 50 bucks on your birthday, this adds up. And so by the time I really remember looking at my bank account when I was in high school, I had $1,000 in my savings account at a minimum. And so even through the whole purse saga, I was not allowed to tap into my savings account to buy this purse, right? So I had to earn other money, which I really genuinely appreciate my dad doing this for me, because then when I went to college, my freshman year of college, I didn't want to work during school because I didn't know, what my course load would be like, and I was kind of nervous about that. So I worked the summer before and I saved up money for the whole school year. And I remember saying, thinking like, I'm going to need this much in gas to come home because my college was 3 hours away, and I'm going to need this much for, fun money or going out to eat, and I'm going to need this much for my books. And so I would save up. I would work all summer and save up like $4,000 was like the number that I needed to save. And then like that $1,000 was always just kind of extra. So, one time I was driving up to Chicago for a job interview, like an internship interview, like my sophomore year of college, and my tire blew. But I didn't have to like panic because I knew like at the end of the day, even if I wasn't like planning on it, in that $4,000 I saved up, I had this $1,000. So like I wasn't going to get derailed financially. I never went into credit card debt throughout all of college, which I know a lot of my classmates did have credit card debt in college. And so for me, I would say that was the best decision through like all the peer pressure of high school and college of like, you could go on spring break or, all these other things. I never caved into that, and I kept that money for emergencies. And to me, that was super beneficial because, I've had a lot of things come up in life where that money did have to go down for a little bit to pay for an emergency, but it never like ruined me or sent me into this like downward spiral of debt because I had this buffer.
Right, and that's a great story to position yourself into, because it's like when, they say people that are, looking for like shelter or food or anything, you have to prioritize those things before anything else, right? And until you have those things, that's your whole focus. And same with finances, right? If you're like in distress or like some emergency comes up and like you need to deal with that situation, then all of your efforts are going toward that, and you're going to pull money from where you need to, even if it hurts you, to solve that immediate problem, right? Mm-hmm. If it's equivalent to starving or needing shelter, or in your case, blowing out your tire. But if you have the safety net there, and that's like a permanent fixture in your portfolio, is to like have that buffer, then you never have to worry about like starving. Right? You can always just say like, okay, emergency happened, and you get out of jail free card for that emergency because I like saved up this buffer, and I don't have to derail. I don't have to take anything out of my mutual funds. I don't have to take anything out of my like long-term savings or investments or anything like that, or stop investing in those areas.
Or more importantly, for a lot of people who don't have those investments, you don't have to put yourself in debt.
Right.
Like I didn't have to go to Payday Advance and pay 4,000% interest, right? Mm-hmm. Like I didn't have to do any of that because I always kept this buffer.
Right. Because that's a snowball, right? Yeah. If one bad thing's happen to you and another bad thing happens to you, it snowballs down the hill. If you have savings that built up, it gets rid of your savings until you go into debt, and then you just dig the hole for debt deeper and deeper. And that buffer, right, that $1,000 buffer, or what we call an emergency fund, right, for how we term it, that saves you from going down that road. Right. Gives you so much flexibility and so much power, just by saving up a couple extra $1,000 and having that available, and just saying like, this is only for core things.
Yeah, and I think it was really good in the sense that it taught me a lot of discipline of like, no, that money is there for emergencies. It's not there for like, oh, well, I got to the end of the month and I spent all my money and I really want to go out to eat with friends. Like it really, and like that's helped me too, right? Because I talk to people a lot who are like, well, how do you save money? Like, how are you so disciplined? And it's like, well, I was just taught how important savings is at that young age. Mm-hmm. And it's just been part of my life for so long that like I don't really understand the flip side anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so by like having that and understanding the value of having savings, true savings that I don't touch, that I don't get into, that helped me be more disciplined just in general throughout life of like, obviously as now I'm an adult and I'm not in college anymore, the $1,000 emergency fund wasn't going to cut it forever. So I had to, build that up. But I had the discipline to do it because I understood how valuable that was.
Right. And that's really the whole practice anyway. Like the money's just sitting in the account. There's no like lasers or, Fort Knox or anything the money is hidden behind. It's your own discipline that is stopping you from taking that money out and treating that as an emergency fund anyway.
Right.
Right. Yeah. There's no like special bank category for emergency fund where they make you like fill out, take like a math test or something to get your money out of the bank. So they make it super hard to do. Right. It's your discipline and your mentality, and developing that early is super critical to long-term success. Because we know a lot of people that have like an emergency fund, but they just dip into it all the time.
Right.
And that's nothing, right? That's just a large savings account that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
You put this stuff away for a rainy day, and if it's not raining, then you don't get to use it, right?
And he doesn't mean the weather. Like, it's not like, oh, it's raining out, time to be a baller. Like,
right? Present time.
Okay, well, let's move on now and talk about your best financial decision.
All right. So I'm going to go back to the college era again and say probably the thing that set me up the best was when I chose to live at home and not move out to, student housing or, getting a house with friends during college.
Yeah.
So for all 4 years, I was living close enough to my college that I went to that I was like allowed to, there was like as long as you were like 45 minutes away or less or something, you were allowed to like stay at home and not forced to live on campus, especially during freshman year. And so obviously there's a huge pros and cons list that goes along with that, right? But one of the major pros is a lot of my meals were paid for, right? Since I was still like living with my family and eating with them. And all of my room and board was paid for.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't have to pay anything for that. So I banked all of that money for all 4 years of college, which is a ton of money.
Yeah, and I think
that's really what kept me out of debt for college. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing because not a lot of kids I know or kids that I knew would have done that, right? Because the whole thing with college is like, gotta get out there and live on campus, and right, like a lot of people would have been like, no, the cons are too big. Mm-hmm. But you were able to recognize how valuable that pro was.
Right.
And the fact that you were able to do that at, college age and see it through, you're right. Like, that did keep you out of debt. It set you up for a lot of success in life. And I think there's a huge story, too, of, like, there's a lot of people that I talk to now that have more, like, the woe is me attitude about, like, oh, well, I have all this debt and you don't. But, like, you made a huge sacrifice to not have that debt.
Right.
And I think, obviously we don't want to, like, I think it would be helpful at some point to redo this episode and do, like, more recent best and worst, because a lot of this is, like, college era, and, like, if our listeners didn't make these decisions, they feel like they missed the boat. And we're not trying to criticize any decisions that you have or haven't made. This was just kind of to be a lessons learned episode for us. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to realize that even though you can't go back and remake these decisions, right? So I went to an out-of-state college and I lived on campus, and that is why I graduated with student loan debt. And I can't go back and I can't change that, but you can decide now to make more optimal decisions going forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the important thing, because I could have stayed in that, mindset where I was focused on material goods and I was focused on fashion, and like fashion can be super expensive, right? So I could be out there buying like I know somebody who gets Stitch Fix, and it's like you have a subscription fee, plus if you want to keep any of the outfits, you have to pay large fees, and it can be like hundreds of dollars a month. So I could be spending thousands of dollars a year on fashion easily, right? I mean, I could go out and buy a purse tomorrow that was $1,000.
Right, just with like clothing and apparel, let alone like makeup and like that's a whole nother multi-billion dollar industry, right?
But at any point in time, you can choose to nip that in the bud. So even though maybe you've missed a boat on being able to live at home, with your parents now. We can't like move back in with our parents, but we can seek to find optimal housing prices, or we can, we've had a roommate before. There's a lot of like creative things that you can do, even if it's not just automatically, moving back in with the folks.
Right. It's just, the normal thing for me to do would have been, to like just go into this experience, do what everybody else is doing, right? And you can just say this about anything, right? And then, not look for creative solutions or like things that may be a little bit more uncomfortable for you, but in the long run are going to be, clearly more beneficial, right? Like I regret nothing about that situation. I don't feel like I missed out on anything like crazy in college because I was living at home at the time. Like it was like the better scenario because I was like able to like go out to house parties and like it wasn't my house that was getting trashed. Right. At the end of the day, I was just able to go home and sleep in my bed, and nobody was coming back to party there. So
I had roommates in college that were the best girls ever, and so we also didn't have parties at my house because my roommates didn't really party. So I would go out and party, and then I would come home, and they would just like hang out with me and like keep the beautifully decorated, clean apartment. So I'm with you on that one. House, make trash in somebody else's house is way more fun.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think it's not like you missed out on anything, and I think it's really important, no matter what decisions you made, to like live with no regrets, right? So like, although I didn't stay at home with my parents, the reason I didn't was the college in the town that I grew up in didn't have as strong of a program for what I majored in as a different college. So I chose slightly differently, and sure, I incurred some debt, but, for me, I still really do feel like I got the right education for my needs. And so there's a lot of factors that go into like choosing a college, and the fact that you were able to make it work is like really, really cool. And
right, and it was, just the stars aligned, and like that situation was just a potential opportunity that I had, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take this path, right? Could do this. I have the opportunity to not have to pay for room and board, so, that's, over 4 years is going to save me like whatever tens of thousands of dollars, so, let's do that.
And your parents are really good cooks.
That's true.
So you didn't have to deal with like dorm food.
That's right.
Probably like... Actually, Ball State had really good dorm food, but like not every college did. So.
No, I don't even think we had a cafeteria. If we did, it was pretty bad. So yeah. It was a small college.
All right. Well, if anybody wants to share their best and worst financial decisions with us, feel free to email us. I think that'd be really interesting to see. And if you liked the 2 episodes a week, feel free to let me know, and we'll try to work more in here and there. So thanks for tuning in this week. I will drop all of my contact information in, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You can just email me at any time. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Money in the Bank. Make sure to subscribe to us on the iTunes or Stitcher app so that you get weekly alerts every time we post a podcast. Or if you want, you can visit my website, moneyinthebankpodcast.com. And if you want to reach out with any questions or further comments, please email me at Angie@moneyinthebankpodcast.com. I look forward to hearing from you.
Money in the bank.